6 more Northfield blocks are being developed. We'd like to offer your firm the rights. $75 million. Great. That's great. How much for my other kid? You know, if I were your economic advisor, I'd tell you that that's not the stupidest thing, financially speaking, that you've ever done, but probably just the dumbest thing you'll do today. But why would you need an economic advisor? 20 years ago, you had the highest GNP in the world. Today, you're tied with Albania. Your second biggest export is second-hand goods, followed closely by dates, for which you lose 5 cents a pound. You want to know what the business world thinks of you? We think 100 years ago you were living out here in tents in the desert, chopping each other's heads off, and that's exactly where you're going to be in another 100. So, yes, on behalf of my firm, I accept your money. Thank you.
Fine. I'll have the funds transferred to your firm immediately.
Great.
And I'll give you another $100 million for the other kid. So now you're my economic advisor. Why don't you tell me something I don't already know?
Hello and welcome back to Schlock and Awe, the podcast that dives into the cinematic universe of the global war on terror in the search for the best post-9/11 war movie. I'm Evan Hill.
And I'm Jack Crosby. In this episode, we're discussing Syriana, the 2005 thriller starring George Clooney, which is loosely based on a memoir by a former CIA case officer that was written a few years before. The film weaves together several points of view to create a really cynical narrative of an intelligence agency more motivated by political expedience and greed than any notions of patriotism or service. Today we're joined by screenwriter and prolific Twitter user Imran Zaidi.
Hello.
Imran, thanks so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
What did you think when we hit you up? Well, so I forget, did you propose Syriana to us, or did we reach out to you and we're like, we want you to do Syriana? I forget what the order of that with Evan was.
Yeah, no, I think I talked to Evan about the concept for this podcast before you guys even started doing it, and he asked me if I had suggestions, and my first one was Syriana, because it's a film that I love, and I'm always happy to rewatch.
Before I get into the film, what is it about Syriana that made you have to do this movie?
I mean, it was kind of formative for me at a time when I was in college, university, as we call it in Canada. And, I was starting to think seriously about pursuing writing as a career. Stephen Gagin was somebody who, was really already known as like a really brilliant screenwriter for Traffic, which he won the Academy Award for. It was a time when, 2005, when obviously the Iraq War had been going on for a couple of years. And, it was just as like a 19-year-old in that time. A lot of our conversations, like just in any kind of social group of that age, just revolved around geopolitics and the state of the world, and why these things were happening. So the fact that it was this fairly big budget, like Hollywood studio movie that seemed to have a certain serious mindedness about things that were happening in the world, and was like kind of forthrightly confronting these things in the same way that Traffic had dealt with the drug war. That made it interesting to me at the time, and after seeing it, I was really impressed by just the level of craft in the writing, and actually it was a script that I would look at, like, when I was kind of starting out in my screenwriting career, just trying to write my first few scripts. Like, it was one of the scripts that I would read every time before I wrote anything, just to remind myself of like what a really good screenplay looked like. So yeah, like I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about the politics of it, but I really appreciate it just on a craft level of like, how good it was at taking this fairly narratively dense, I guess you'd call it a story. Like it's almost more like a situation or like a system of interconnected things than a story. But taking that and really expressing it in a pretty efficient way. I was going to say clear way, but I think there is. I think to me this is maybe an insecurity of Stephen Gagan's, that like he doesn't want anybody to think that he's stupid, and so he'll sort of intentionally obfuscate things so that like you feel stupid for not understanding the story he's trying to tell.
As the podcast like resident dumb guy, this was a movie that made me feel very stupid for a solid 2/3 of it, and until I really got a handle on it.
I mean, it's interesting. I think there's like several things you just mentioned, Imran, that are good prompts for our discussion today. And I think that like the ability to understand the conspiracy is like one of them, because we're in like a new age of political conspiracy. Everyone's looking back at like the famous conspiracy movies of the past. And, I think some directors now are sort of, Eddington is one of them that is sort of like the genre, a genre that we can say is maybe like the conspiracy that the protagonist doesn't realize that they're in. I would just watch Gene Hackman in Night Moves. That's definitely one of them. Obviously, there's ones that are sort of more like Big Lebowski type Long Goodbye stuff. But I think that's maybe a good jumping off point for trying to understand this movie. Before we get into that, though, just to place this into like the GWOT pantheon, I was looking up box office results for the movies that we've reviewed on this series so far, which are Benghazi, Billy Lynn, Lone Survivor, Zero Dark 30, American Sniper. Side note, I did not realize just how successful American Sniper was. That movie grossed half $500 million internationally.
Oh, yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. So Syriana premieres New York City, November 20th, 2005. The seed of the idea comes pretty quickly after 9/11, when apparently director and writer Stephen Gagan is given a copy of ex-CIA officer Robert Baer's book, See No Evil. Apparently it's Soderbergh who gives Gagan the book after 9/11 as sort of like if you want to understand what the fuck's going on, read this book. Gagan like gets super into it, and apparently Baer, I mean, I'm just cribbing from Wikipedia right now, but Baer takes him on like kind of a tour of like the Middle East and sits him down with like sheikhs and businessmen and seedy types of all varieties. And then that turns into Syriana, which shoots, I think I saw that it shot in 200 locations on 5 continents. Just kind of this kind of type of movie that, I mean, Imran, you have much greater visibility into the film industry than we do, but it seems like the kind of movie that doesn't really get made anymore. Like,
absolutely. And I actually, I once met the studio president at Warner Brothers who greenlit Syriana. I think I didn't know that he was the person who greenlit that movie, and I just mentioned Syriana as like a movie that I really liked. And he's like, oh yeah, I made that one. And I told him how much I liked it. And his kind of attitude toward it was like, yeah, it's just one of those things that, all these actors happen to be available at the same time, so we were able to make that movie. Like, it's just, this rare alignment of like schedules allowed that thing to happen. So
I'm reading that Harrison Ford was he was originally slated to play Bob, and he turned down the role because, I'm reading from the Wikipedia here, stating, I didn't feel strongly enough about the truth of the material, and I think I made a mistake.
I saw that.
So Harrison Ford was not woke when he was offered this role, and then later he saw the truth.
Clooney, like, obviously, Clooney has politics. Clooney has, pretty good politics, especially by Hollywood standards. And actually, this is I think the only movie that Clooney has won an acting Oscar for, which is kind of shocking. He wins Best Supporting Actor for Syriana. He's been nominated for Best Actor for others and lost. His only other Oscar is Best Picture for Argo, which is kind of funny because it's almost like in a similar genre. So he wins for Best Supporting. And the Syriana grosses almost $100 million worldwide, which puts it solidly kind of in the middle of the pack of the movies we've reviewed. Pretty successful, which is, to be honest with you, I thought before looking this up that it was going to be I mean, I knew that it was like well regarded, but I thought it was going to be a failure because I was like, what American audience wants to like consume what is essentially like a New Yorker article? You know, like this is basically like a filmed New Yorker article.
Especially when it comes out too.
Well, that's the other thing is that like 2005, like I think that's a good point, Jack, is that like this is actually, and you see it with other
we're at, like peak of rah, like Iraq is like just starting to kind of go bad.
It was just starting to go bad
on us in this.
Yeah, exactly. It's like not quite 2007 when like things are like, you know, we get Obama because of how bad Iraq is going, but like it is kind of early in the reaction to the war on terror, and it's sort of like, you know, one of the only movies that we've reviewed that straightforwardly shows the United States as like an evil actor in this world. So I guess just to like maybe kick off kind of the discussion is like, you know, Imran had mentioned this being a film that was so good at kind of showing the like a dense story. And so I'm curious what both of you guys think in terms of like how well is and we can get into there's like 3 or 4 storylines here, but how well is the conspiracy represented in this movie, and how does this movie succeed both at telling like a very dense sort of like journalistic story versus how well does this movie succeed like as a movie that makes you like interested in watching it and interested in seeing the characters like progress? Because I have my own thoughts on that. But
in my opinion, again, as someone who is largely stupid and had never seen this movie before.
Oh, you never seen Syriana?
No,
oh, wow.
I'd never seen it. I thought I'd seen it.
Okay.
I think I maybe got it confused with something else, but yeah, so I'd never seen it, but I think if I had not been, because I couldn't help myself in sort of in the beginning of the movie, I didn't realize that it was I went into it almost completely cold. I didn't really realize that it was a multiple tangential storylines movie. So like after the opening few scenes, I was like, wait a second, I need to get a better handle on like what's going on here. I'm not sure if some of, like you said, Imran, some of the sort of like pivotal plot points are so well, I don't know if like hidden is the right word, but they're so kind of subtle in how they're sort of developed. You see by the end of the film, you can see the broad strokes of them. I'm not sure that like on a first watch, especially as like the median American film goer, which I can probably sort of represent. I'm not sure that if the median American film goer in 2005 who does not have Wikipedia on their phone would have fully gotten everything. But what I do think that the movie does really well, which I think I have in my notes, I think the high point, the central point in the movie is Tim Blake Nelson, or who I referred to in my notes as Buster Scruggs, because for some reason that like pandemic Netflix movie is just lodged in my brain. Yeah. That's who he is Buster Scruggs like corruption is why we win speech in the middle when he gets like confronted with like, sorry, you're going to be the fall guy because we've got a paper trail of you Danny like paying the Kazakh guys like boarding fee or boarding school fees or something like that. That speech, I think, really like anchors the movie and makes it very clear that like this is a movie about real situations that the companies who essentially, you know, and there's bits, the clip on TV of the guy talking about like, I have a picture with the president and I show this to people all over the world and they know that I know the president and etc. Like it hammers home that like the people who are making the deals that largely govern the world that we live in are all just like completely amoral and out for themselves. Like there are no good guys in this movie in any way. And even the characters that you feel a little bit sympathetic for, or who are like trying to do a good thing, you know, maybe Bob in the end, you know, because he's trying to save Nasir's life, is, you know, he's a hired assassin. Like he sets off most of the whole, like a lot of the plot by killing the 2 Iranian intelligence agents in the like second scene of the movie, you know, like, so I feel like it was very effective in that, in like in early on in America's cultural history of our involvement overseas, hammering home the point that like there are no good guys here, and that America's actions overseas are justified far more by the economic priorities of a bunch of fucking Texans in a ballroom than they are by like actually wanting good for other people in the world.
Yeah, like I will say that, you know, I saw that movie in theaters when it came out, and I saw it with a bunch of friends, and I don't think any of us like understood what had happened in it. Like we were all just kind of befuddled by it, and it was only after like watching it, you know, a second and third time that I came to appreciate, you know, I think partly the truth of it as I saw it. You know, something that really frustrated me about debates around Iraq at that time was, you know, people would be like, it's just about oil, or like, no, actually it's about, you know, neoconservatives wanting to create a liberal democracy in the Middle East. And it would always just be like just one reason, you know, one kind of defining cause. And I think something that Syriana does extremely well, that I think is quite rare in you know, especially in Hollywood cinema, is that it's never that simple, and it's you know, it's both those things. Like it's a whole web of reasons why these things happen. And I think that complexity is probably like, you know, I think the defining element of the movie. And, you know, as you mentioned, Evan, like none of the characters in it understand the full situation, you know, as intelligent and kind of, you know, plugged in as they are. Like even, you know, Christopher Plummer's character, who's like kind of the most sort of omniscient godlike figure in the story, is still kind of in the dark about some of these elements. So I think it does do an excellent job of depicting a I guess like network of narrative elements that you know, speak with a lot of truth to, you know, the actual complexity of events in the world. You know, I guess you could argue that like even though it's sort of trying to say like, well, you can't be too reductive about these things, and, you know, it's always, everything is connected, and it's more complex than that. I think by its nature as like a 2-hour and something minute film, like it does have to be more reductive than the actual truth of the real world. And, you know, I guess that's on a craft level, or like on a level of like how well it works as a film. That's maybe one of the flaws of it, is that like, you know, none of the characters are really real characters. They're more like archetypes representing this type of person. And, you know, but at the same time, I would say that something really bold about it, it feels bold even now, and was even more so in 2005, is that like to the extent that it has like an emotional center, you know, the most affecting and sort of sympathetic character is the young Pakistani boy who, you know, becomes a terrorist. You know, that's kind of like him, and his relationship with his father is really like he's the most kind of pure-hearted character. And, you know, at least I guess I'm biased because I'm of a similar background, and, you know, my family, like we spoke Urdu at home, and so like when I hear that in the movie, it's like you know, it probably affects me in a different way than another member of the audience. But I feel like this was a consistent thing in kind of the response to it, is that like everybody really connected to that character. So, you know, that's something that I think is pretty unusual about the film, and I think pretty cool.
It's kind of remarkable that like it's a 2-hour film. Nowadays, if it was made, it would definitely be 3 hours. But in that 2 hours, you get Bob Bear, aka what's his name? Barnes. Bob Barnes. You get Bob Barnes. You get Bob Barnes' son. You get Salim and Wasim, the father and son Pakistani workers in what is probably Qatar, I think. They never say. And then and you get Jeffrey Wright's character, who I think Jeffrey Wright is the best, sort of acting the best in this film. And it's like kind of astonishing that, you know, it's credit, as you said, to the writing of Stephen Gaghan that he crams like not only all of the meat into this screenplay, but also like spends a significant amount of time on Salim and Wasim, and everyone gets a little bit of, everyone gets their moment. We get Bennett Holiday, Jeffrey Wright's character Bennett Holiday with his father. We get Bob Barnes with his son, and we get Salim and Wasim. And you could argue that the sort of like terrorist trajectory of Wasim is simplified, but of course it is. It has to be, presented in like probably cumulative like 15 minutes of screen time. And like that is pretty remarkable screenwriting. What it takes away, obviously, is like you don't really spend a lot of time with any one character, and so like even though Clooney wins the Oscar for this, I feel like Bob Barnes. Something for me didn't quite click about Bob Barnes, and like just I get what he's doing. He's sort of like he's the soldier. He's like he's been in the trenches of like U.S. counterterrorism since Lebanon 1980s, and he's been beaten down. But I don't really feel like he seems to kind of despise his son, who by the way is like wearing like a very funny like 2000s era too tight like Strokes suit at lunch, and like gets this weird moment where he's like really oily and like weird with the girl sitting at the table next to them, and it's like I don't know why.
I did not understand that. Like it's like a 3-second shot. And it's very strange where he just tries to borrow the bottle of hot sauce, and it's unclear as to whether he's supposed to be were they saying that like, oh, he's so charming, the girls love him, like Bob's son, or was it like, why is he being weird to these girls? It was very confusing. I had no idea what that shot was supposed to establish.
I mean, I don't want to over psychologize Bob Bear, but I feel like there was some father son dynamic. I don't know. He was squeezing into that. But like it's funny. No, you were saying, Imran, earlier, like no one in this movie fully understands what they're stuck in or why exactly they have to do the thing that they do. And it makes me think of Bob's two like CIA sort of colleagues, supervisors, who, in a different version of this world are basically like burn after reading characters, because, they're like, we like Bob, like, let's give Bob this job. And then someone else unseen sort of like at a higher level is like, no, Bob needs to die. And like, they end up droning Bob accidentally.
It's portrayed as Bob becomes expendable because he can't keep his mouth shut at the meeting with the Committee to Liberate Iran people.
Right.
Like they told him like, don't take any bait. Because that, I think, was like the test case, because they were like, let's give Bob a desk job. And they're like, Bob's an outside dog. He's never sat at a desk. Right. Like, he's not going to be good at this. But let's bring him into this meeting so he can show his expertise. And then maybe we can put him off in a desk and, put him out to pasture or whatever. And he tells the, stupid white evangelicals and oil guys that, like, no, Iran, like, having a few satellite TVs is not ever going to mean that, the grasp of power and the like, we're not getting another revolution the other way around. But so I think he becomes expendable like sort of right in that scene, and then everything after that is them sort of like,
well, I guess like the basic outline of the conspiracy, if I understand it correctly, and you guys tell me if this is your read on it too, is that Bob is sent on like a fully endorsed CIA mission to like buy back these weapons, or like destroy these like, surface to air missiles or whatever they are, so that they can't get into the hands of terrorists. And so he blows up these two guys in Tehran, which is hilarious to imagine like a CIA agent like blowing up two guys in the middle of Tehran and not getting caught. But and they turn out to be Iranian intelligence agents, and Musawi, played by Mark Strong, in a very very sinister role. He, it's very hard to spot if you're watching it without like the cliff notes, but he turns out to be like some kind of mercenary figure who's working on behalf of the Iranians, and he is gonna like put it out there that Bob is a CIA agent and was sent on like another mission to kill the Emir, Prince, Nasir from Qatar or wherever it is, who the CIA has wrongly identified as like one of the arms traffickers. And so this, like Bob becomes someone the CIA has to get rid of because he's about to be exposed, and it's going to reveal that like the CIA was like carrying out hits basically.
Well, I think that the pivotal moment, probably my favorite scene in the film, is when Dean Whiting, played by Christopher Plummer, is on the yacht of the the younger
Mashal,
prince of whatever, and he, I think Roger Ebert singled out this scene and the ones like it in the film as like his favorite depiction of the way power actually works in like these closed rooms where they're having this pleasant conversation over brandy, and Dean Whiting asks Mashal, like, is there anything that my firm can do for you? And Mashal kind of arrogantly like says, like I know who you are, you're the cat's paw of the Saudi princes, like I don't need your help. And then Plummer like kind of just berates him. He calls him a big baby. He says like, are you a king? Can you tell me what you want? And we don't see it, but the scene right after that is the CIA basically identifying Nasir as like the source of these like terrorist funds and basically putting a hit on him. So what's implied to have happened is that Mashal told Dean Whiting, I want my brother out of the way so that I can be the new emir. And Dean Whiting used his connections to basically, create this narrative around Nasir, who the CIA was already suspicious of because he had granted these these oil contracts to China instead of to the American company. Like they were already kind of seeing him as an enemy, and now Whiting through whatever connections he has provided the the false proof that will allow them to have the justification to kill him. And they give Bob a second chance by sending him on that mission, and it ends up being a bit of a ruse because Musawi, the contact, is actually working for the Iranians, and is kind of out to get Bob. So yeah, it's like really the most important moment of the story actually happens off screen, and we have to sort of put it together from the available evidence. But if like looking at like the sequence of those scenes, it's it's kind of clear what's implied to have happened.
Right. And it's crazy that it works even though that is off screen. And then, I mean, you have the Committee to Liberate Iran, like sort of hovering on the margins of this movie. And it'll drop in, like, it'll give you like a 1 second look at like, Buster Scruggs, what's his name? Danny Dalton? He's a member of the committee, and then you find out that this oil guy's a member of the committee, and Dean Whiting's I think maybe a member of the committee or like tied to it. And it's like that's pretty smart, and also really like kind of trusting a little bit of the audience to kind of figure out who's calling the shots in this movie.
Yeah.
So the thing about the film that like I think doesn't work for me, the most obvious drawback of like this style of the sort of traffic style of writing and directing is that you don't follow one person throughout the film, and so we haven't talked about Matt Damon yet and like his character, and like it's interesting like the fact that Matt Damon is in this movie because he doesn't really need to be. He's almost like a sort of like a failed 21st century like Lawrence. When I saw him, I was like, okay, this is like Lawrence of Arabia if he didn't play a major role and like failed at his job and like didn't understand anything that was going on. Like he's like he ends up in this position accidentally. He's not even working on behalf of a government. I mean, he's doing something in the interest of the United States without even really realizing it. He gets sort of this romantic bug about like he's the guy who can convince Nasir to be a reformer, and then he just sort of like the car in front of him blows up, everything's over, and he just like starts walking off through the desert.
I think his role, almost his character's role, is to be a stand-in for the like idealistic designs of the US government. Like he gets really into Prince Nassim being this like this like reformer, this progressive or whatever, and like truly believes it, and that's why he offers the considerable financial help of his company to and there's something there. I think I didn't fully catch this, but there's something there. The initial like economic plan that he gives Prince Nassim to use surplus Iranian pipeline, that's also somehow connected to whatever Jeffrey Wright does to basically stab his mentor in the back. There's some deal that's signed there between companies about Iranian surplus like pipeline. It's mentioned again by Jeffrey Wright. So there's some connection there, but I think basically his role is to kind of just be like a stand-in for the person who truly thinks that they're going to be able to do some good in this situation. And the end result of it is that the most pivotal decision that Matt Damon makes in the film is that he gets out of the car with the prince and puts the prince's entire family in the same car as him, ensuring that they all die as well as him. Yeah. There's also, while we're doing that, a like little tidbit that I found was that there was a fifth storyline written and shot for this movie, which starred Michelle Monaghan playing a Miss USA contestant who becomes involved with a rich Arab oil man. So there was a whole like fifth storyline of like an Arab oil tycoon and like an American like supermodel that got cut entirely from this. So there's Matt Damon isn't like, I think you could conceivably cut Matt Damon's storyline as well, but I think it does seem like the director was very much searching for a stand-in of like an idealistic American getting swept up into all of this through their own sort of self-interest.
Yeah,
like shallow self-interest.
To be honest, Matt Damon's character in this movie is probably a stand-in for the way I was in 2006. I was like, I think I was like a junior in college studying Arabic, and I had been to Egypt to like do study abroad, and I was like, I am the guy who can explain this region to the American people. And then you like live through it, and you go through the American Revolution, the Syrian Civil War, and you're like, I don't understand shit. I'm just like Matt Damon. I don't understand anything.
Yeah.
I do think it's very funny at the end of the movie when, he kind of like walks back into his family's house, and it's sort of presented as this moment of like he's sort of seen the light and realized like this is where he actually belongs, but like literally he's lost his job because the guy he was working for got blown up. There's nowhere else to go.
And his son died in a swimming pool.
His son was
his son was electrocuted because of a faulty pool light, which I feel like is a thing that shouldn't be. I don't know much about, swimming pools and swimming pool technology, but I feel like how's it like the front of a light on a pool like cracking? I feel like maybe they have more seals than that, where it just doesn't expose like a live current to water if the cover cracks. I don't know.
This is one of my favorite little details of the movie. Like there's this whole kind of thing of China sort of hovering over the film as like the new power that's not just surpassing the United States economically, but like also technologically and maybe even in their sort of deftness with geopolitics. But in that early scene where they're at the party at the villa, like the emir is explaining to the Chinese guests that his son Mishal has wired this whole place as a smart home.
It's a genius home.
That he had American engineers do the wiring, and then like it's literally moments later that he's trying to turn on the pool lights and that they stop working, and there's the blown bulb that kills Matt Damon's son. So it's like it's because of these shitty American engineers.
I totally did not catch that he said it was American engineers. That's funny. Yeah. That's really funny. And, the Chinese are in there, and like, I think there's a remark about like, hey, look at you guys, like you try to learn Arabic. I feel like there's like a lot of sublimated American, I would say American liberal shame in this screenplay that I'm guessing probably doesn't exist in Bob Baer's book, which I have not read, but like we can touch on that a little bit. But, Gagin, I think in an interview there was like a big New York Times story around the time that Syriana was coming out that was like, look at all of these movies that are really trying to like catch us all up with what the deal is with American intelligence. And it cited Syriana, Charlie Wilson's War, and The Good Shepherd, also starring Matt Damon. As an aside, The Good Shepherd for me represents one of the most disappointing films that I can think of, because it's about James Jesus Angleton, who is like one of the most interesting figures in CIA history, and like is sort of half adapted from one of my favorite books, Harlot's Ghost by Norman Mailer, and could have been like, you know, Oliver Stone's JFK specifically applied to the CIA, but ended up being sort of half-assed. Anyway, the New York Times at the time was like, look at all of these films that are, you know, bringing us up to speed on American intelligence and like what went wrong. And Gagin is quoted in there saying something, and I'm paraphrasing here, to the effect of like, and Imran, I feel like, you know, you and me and Jack sort of as journalists, we've all had this feeling of like something enormous has happened in the world. Like there's been an event of world-changing enormity, in this case 9/11, and all of us like want a piece of this. We're like vibrating on a frequency now that's like we want to figure out what's going on. Like, this is crazy. Like, how it came out of nowhere, you know, we got to figure it out. And so Gagin obviously did his research for this movie. Bob Baer, you know, took him around and on this like tour of the Middle East and everything, and he's sort of, I think, sublimating a lot of American liberal feelings about how we just don't understand this region at all. And so there's like several references to like, we don't even speak the language, you know. Clooney's character is such a standout because he does speak Farsi, and he speaks Persian, he does speak Arabic. There's that line in the beginning where the Egyptian terrorist is like has the gun to his head, and Clooney like says to him like, I bet you don't even speak Farsi, do you? Like, you goat fucker, or something like that. And so like there's these sort of little things dropped into this movie that are like, we don't understand what's going on. We are pretty stupid. Like, we're in the dark here, just like Bob Barnes is. And there's two things I would say about that. One is that I feel like that attitude actually got lost the more time went by. So like Zero Dark 30, the movies that are being made now, you know, Warfare or what have you, are no longer really concerned about, hey, we don't understand this region at all. It's sort of like we're actually so far into the war that it's like, it's almost like either you're getting really into the nitty gritty of like what a commando raid looks like, or the message is like nothing matters at all. It's all like, it's all meaningless. It's no longer like a search for, let's really figure this out. Like we can figure this out and we can make things better, which I think Gagin is maybe working on. And then also, like, I don't know actually if I would say, I would be curious what you guys think in terms of Bob Baer's book. Apparently is sort of like the CIA lost its way. It got worse at intelligence because we became too concerned about like tiptoeing around the region, and we got like too politically correct, and we got too afraid of like doing clandestine missions, and we weren't good at it anymore. So Bob Baer's book is kind of like, we fucked up Empire a little bit, whereas Gagin's screenplay is, to me at least, more about like explicitly like, oh, Empire's bad, like this is bad, like we are the bad guys. I'm curious if you guys shared that vibe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thesis from what I've read about Baer's book comes through in that scene that I was talking about when Clooney tells the committee to liberate Iran like more than they actually want to know. Right. And that was where he was demonstrating that like the CIA, everything above the foot soldiers now has become so tied into the political tailwinds and bureaucracy that it overshadows any kind of actual sort of like intelligence in there. And I think, but then what the film does is it goes on to show is that how basically every decision the CIA makes from that point is wrong. Right. Like they get the wrong guy. They misidentify the wrong guy. They send in the first guy that they send in, Bob, gets captured, and they don't really ever figure out who captured him or why. They just say, all right, let's distance ourselves from him as much as possible. Like it seems like there's another, I guess, a theme of this movie essentially is like everyone is constantly doing various misdeeds to try and get ahead, and the second most important thing that everyone is doing is trying to find a scapegoat to pin those on when they go wrong.
Right.
Like, that's what the oil companies are doing, that's what the law firm is doing, that's what the CIA is doing. So I don't know, you know, I'd have to have read Bear's book to figure out if it really goes into that, but it does feel like those themes are sort of represented, which is interesting, as you said, Evan, when we compare it to like later intelligence focused GWOT movies that are like, oh no, we are actually really good at this now. We have the best minds on the case. And sometimes bureaucracy gets in their way, but in the end, Jessica Chastain does get her man, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think if you look at other films of that era that were anti-American in some way, like I'm thinking about like, you know, the Bourne movies, which are quite anti-CIA. But in a, you know, it's this sort of more narrow thing of like they're focused on this specific part of, you know, the U.S. You know, government apparatus, or, you know, the way that it does intelligence. They're not really making a statement about, you know, American empire or America as a whole. Whereas Syriana, like, you know, not just what it's saying about America's desire and ability to be an empire, but something I really noticed on this watch was like just how good the movie is at establishing a sense of place and setting, no matter where it's going. You know, in the editing and sort of the way that it shoots these locations, and the way that it depicts America is really interesting, because there are scenes like, I mean, there's a lot of like sort of lonely driving scenes, but there's this moment that really stuck out to me where Clooney's character goes to see William Hurt's character, who, you know, is implied to be like this former agent who's gone into the private sector but still like has a lot of connections and knows a lot of things. So he seeks him out for advice, and they're hanging out at this bar, which is just like, it seems like a normal sort of, you know, Irish pub style bar. They walk out of the bar and they're in this massive parking lot.
Huge parking lot. Yes. I noticed that too.
There's like there's like an IKEA there. It's just like this, you know, this weird sort of dystopian place.
Yes.
And also when he goes to see his colleague, played by, I think, Tom McCarthy, you know, he's living in like, and this guy's implied to have, you know, he's implied to be sort of on a real, like, really good career track where, you know, he's already making good money and, you know, is going to be like, you know, high up in the CIA within a few years.
Right.
He has this house in this, what looks like this very newly built, kind of like weird, Virginia subdivision.
Right.
Where, you know, all the lawns are like, you can tell that they were just like, you know, like sod that were just placed there, and like they're not real lawns and everything. It's like, the way that the film depicts America is it's almost like the way that like a European foreigner would look at the country, as like, you know, this really depressing, disconnected, fake place with no real, you know, life or culture, which I think is quite rare for a Hollywood film.
You know it's really, I'm glad you said that, because I was watching it and I was sort of like, okay, this is a movie that I'm watching to enjoy because it's like a meaty, like I said, like it's a meaty New Yorker article. So it's like, you know, about the Middle East. So it's like designed to like please me. And I was like, but it's not so good at like, you know, developing a single character, and maybe it's not so good at like, you know, making a beautiful film. But I actually think I'm a little bit wrong about that, because I do agree that like the observed details of the world are like really good, and it does some things visually that you know, you kind of don't even notice, like the shots of Qatar, you know, the Falcon training scene, the camera like gliding up as the sun is rising. I mean, the final scene where like the Connex tanker is like looming, like and they're clearly shooting it in front of like a real tanker, which you probably wouldn't see anymore. It turns out that and I guess I shamefully did not know this, but this movie was shot by Robert Elswit, who is Paul Thomas Anderson's cinematographer. So he did Boogie Nights. He did, you know, There Will Be Blood, which is, you know, one of the most visually beautiful films that ever been made. He's also partnered with the Gilroys a lot. So he did Michael Clayton, and you know, not to be like the guy who's only seen Michael Clayton is getting Michael Clayton vibes from Syriana, but like I kind of got Michael Clayton vibes, you know, like it's a lot of boardrooms, you know, it's sort of like halogen core.
A shot that I think really emphasizes, I think, what you're both saying is that, so in a lot of these movies, especially movies that deal with politics and espionage and stuff like that, you'll get the classic, like, you know, movie that Jim from The Office is in now or whatever. There'll be a sweeping aerial shot of like the Pentagon or DC. The reflecting pool will be lit up at night. You'll get both the Capitol building and the Washington Monument in it. Or in Langley, you know, you'll get the sort of like foresty suburbs with nondescript office buildings, and it'll be like CIA headquarters, Langley, and stuff that like sort of preserves the American mystique of these places as like where these big important decisions are being made, as being these big cinematic places. In this movie, I think, I could be wrong, maybe there's an aerial shot of that in one of the other earlier DC scenes, but the only scene that you really get this establishing shot of DC is when Jeffrey Wright's character is on his jog and he gets pulled into the car by the U.S. District Attorney or DOJ guy or something like that. And it's when he stops his run at the top of the hill and he's like huffing and puffing, and you get this establishing shot of DC, and it's like the Capitol building peeking out over like a shitty neighborhood.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch of like industrial like pipes and like snarled telephone lines and like a smokestack and like, you know, that he's just jogged up a hill that could be in any shitty, you know, American Rust Belt city or something like that. Yeah. And the Capitol building is just there in the background. And that's the only establishing shot that we get of DC and of where, you know, he's making these big, you know, big decisions in where all this is playing out. The other shot that I really liked just like aesthetically, I don't know if it has as much, you know, symbolism to it, was the first meeting between Bob and the Iranian contact that's down at the docks in Beirut. Yeah, that was like, that was really cool. And it's such a sort of like, if you've been to like to Beirut and to that part of like, I've only been to Beirut once, you know, but I definitely remember there's like that road that runs kind of along the harbor, and it all has like, there's a big sort of sharp drop off with a seawall that like those waves are always hitting. And that's such a sort of distinctive, like, I don't know. I thought that shot, there were a few moments where you're right, Evan, when like Ellsworth, you're like, oh, maybe this was shot by a guy who really knows ball, even if that's clearly not like, this isn't a movie where they're trying to flex the cinematography at every point in time, but it's like, oh, this is actually all deliberate.
Right.
You know?
And speaking of craft, Imran, since you're, you know, a professional screenwriter, and you've mentioned a couple moments in this film that, you know, you kind of admire, especially the sort of the unseen connection between Dean Whiting and the decision to take out Prince Nasir. What, in terms of like craft, I mean, when you're writing, this is such and he did it in Traffic too. He's got to cram so much material into this, and sort of, I mean, he manages to do it without too many scenes that you never feel exactly like you're like suffering through exposition. Were there any other sort of moments, writing moments, tricks, techniques that he used in the film, or just moments of writing that stood out to you? And in terms of like the pacing and how he managed to put in, I think, 4 major storylines, does that seem like a huge achievement to you?
I think there's some nice moments of very direct exposition in it. I mean, he uses like the classic thing of like a news broadcast a couple times just to, you know, sort of set up a like, I think early on when he's setting up what's happening with Connex and Killeen. But there's a scene where it's at the CIA when there's this like briefing happening about I think it's just about sort of the Emir and his 2 sons and like what the deal is with that country
in like the lecture hall.
Yeah, and the actor that he chose to deliver that has like the most boring, monotonous voice, which I think is so fun. Like there's some moments of like really nice, dry, intentional humor in the movie, and I think that's one of them. How like this guy delivering a briefing to, you know, what we can assume are very, very, you know, high-ranking, powerful people in the CIA about matters that are of significant geopolitical importance. He's just doing like this like the most boring PowerPoint in the world. But there's something that's like kind of, because there is stuff happening in that scene. Like it's when Bob's two colleagues are discussing, like, I think whether to send him on the mission or something.
Right.
And then he comes in. But having that, sort of almost in the background as like this exposition that you're drawn to almost because it is so weirdly droning, and like the execution of that I thought was really nice, and it does give you like useful some useful background information on not just on this fictional country and its leadership, but also the way that the U.S. kind of sees them, and the way that they're being analyzed in these halls of power. But I think the thing that the movie does really consistently and really well is just like expressing a lot, kind of the same way that it does with the way it shoots these locations, just like expressing a lot about a given character or circumstance through dialogue that is like really minimal and very naturalistic. Like we get an amazing sense of Prince Mashal's character when sort of this like establishing scene on the yacht when he's talking about the best birthday gift he ever got, and he says it's like when his 18th birthday, when his trust fund matured and the horse that he owned like won the Derby or whatever, and then he says to his guests like, so that trumps like any gift that any of you lot have bought for me today. And that tells you everything about who this guy is. And I think Gagan has an exceptional ear for just the way that different kinds of people talk, and so like lines of dialogue that in other writers' hands might just be like more generic, or something that is happening at the beginning of a scene, just as like the end of something that someone is saying to somebody else, just to sort of like bring you into this moment. Gagan is able to make that line something that is actually of significance to both character and sort of establishing the world that he's trying to create. So I think he doesn't waste any words in his script, and everything really has a purpose, which even if you're writing a screenplay that is not as dense as this one, that is something that's, I think, kind of essential to feature screenwriting, because you have so little time to tell a story, that you really have to make sure that every line of dialogue is doing work on a character and plot and world building level.
Right. Gagan, by the way, after Syriana, makes a movie called Gold with Matthew McConaughey, a movie, and then he makes Doolittle.
There's an incredible story that I heard. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Evan.
No, go ahead.
So this is something that it's not something that is a privileged story that I heard from somebody, from an insider. It's something that that it was on Reddit. But it was someone who had worked on Doolittle was talking about the production, and so it's like, I guess no one really understood why Stephen Gagan had been hired to make this movie. I think Robert Downey Jr. was the star of it, and they must have been buddies. And like Downey was like, come make this movie, and you'll get like $5 million or whatever. Right. And Gagan just had no experience working with CGI. So like all the animals in this movie that Dr. Doolittle talks to are CGI animals. And Gagan was used to a style of shooting where it's very almost like guerrilla style, like you don't really plan too much and you just kind of like figure things out on the day. And that's what he kept saying, like, we'll just figure it out on the day. And his VFX people kept telling him, like, you can't do that with CGI. Like, you have to know where things are. Like, and then
you can't actually tell the bear to just do something differently. Like.
Yeah. And then there was a moment in the production where they were showing him like an early version of a completed scene, and it was all wrong, like, because he didn't plan anything, so it was like not what it was supposed to be. And he punched the 8K television that they were showing it to him on, and like put a hole in it. He went through a lot on that shoot.
Man, fucking Doolittle. Until I was researching what Gagin did after Syriana, I did not know about this movie because it fell into the COVID hole. But it stars Robert Downey Jr., Antonio Banderas, Michael Sheen, Emma Thompson, Rami Malek, John Cena, Kumail Nanjiani, Tom Holland, Selena Gomez.
Yeah.
Like, what
Ralph
happened here?
Fiennes, Marion Cotillard. Like,
so he did Doolittle, and then apparently he wrote a movie coming out next year called $1 Billion Spy, starring Russell Crowe, which is about I guess it's a Cold War story, but it's really weird. I don't know if Iman, you have like any particular insight into this, but like he wrote but did not direct Traffic. Then he wrote a couple other things in a movie called Havoc with Anne Hathaway and Bijou Phillips. And then he does kind of like almost as an outsider to me out of nowhere, like does Syriana, which is like becomes a classic of the genre. But like where did Stephen Gagin come from and where did he go?
So there's this New Yorker article about, it's about like a therapist for screenwriters. And he kind of specifically helps people who like have writer's block or like can't write. And there's an anecdote in it which does not identify the screenwriter that it's talking about, but there are enough clues to figure out that it's Stephen Gagin, where this therapist is talking about a writer who came to him and said like, listen, I've been hired to write this script for a big studio, and it's my first really big project, and I just like cannot write anything. And like it's been like I have to deliver a script in like 6 weeks. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. And the advice that he was given was every day, just write down the worst sentence you can think of. Just like the worst thing you can, just write something down. And he started doing that. And then, he started to like, just like a scene just came into his head of like people like talking at a party or something. And, he started writing the script that became Traffic and like won him the Oscar. So I think he'd been hired to like on a very, because I think Soderbergh was already attached to the movie, so they were able to kind of sell it as a pitch really easily. But it was just like, the concept I think at the time was just Soderbergh would make a movie that was, kind of a realistic drama about the drug war, but there was no idea of like what the structure would be or like, what the story was or who the characters were, and that was all Gagin's job to figure out. And I know that he based a lot of it on like his own experiences. Like there's a sort of famous anecdote about, cause in the movie there's a teenage character who's like a straight A student, who does a lot of heroin and is like freebasing and,
she's Michael Douglas's daughter, right?
I think the daughter's boyfriend brings her, kind of brings her to drugs. So he's like a, exceptional student. He's going to get into an Ivy League school, but he is like doing heroin like every day. And, somebody said to Gagin, like, this character is not realistic. Like this kid would not exist. Like he'd be destitute. He'd be on the street. He wouldn't be getting straight A's in school. And Gagin was like, I actually was that kid. Like that was me in high school.
Wow.
So yeah, and that movie was a hit and won him the Oscar, and he ended up being in this unique situation where I think he asked for and received a unlimited research budget from Warner Brothers to write Syriana, so he was able to like go wherever he wanted, talk to whoever he wanted, not just his travels with Bob Baer, but he was talking to like people who were basically the real life version of Matt Damon in the story, and he was able to meet with, I forget which country, but kind of the leadership of one of the Arab Emirates, because they were just like fans of movies. So they were like, oh yeah, this screenwriter can come hang out with us. So,
it was a Hezbollah. Like he met up with
Hezbollah.
He met up with like a high-ranking member, well, according to the story at least, met up with like a high-ranking member of Hezbollah. I think it might have been Fadlallah. A lot of these guys.
Yeah, it was. Oh,
wow.
Moments after arriving in Beirut in 2002, Gagin was taken from the airport in a blindfold and hood, where he met with Sheikh Mohammed Hussein Falala, who was interested in films. The sheikh decided to grant the writer an audience, even though he had not requested one. So he shows up in Beirut, and the very high-ranking Hezbollah guy is just like, yeah, grab that guy. I want to chat with him.
Right. I mean, everyone's a cinephile, I guess.
Yeah.
But
he's worked a lot as like an A-list screenwriter, and there's actually, I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm one of the main scholars of the leaked Sony emails from
yes,
from,
I do know
2014. and Gagan is in those a lot because he was good friends with Michael Linton, who was the chairman of the studio, even higher ranking than Amy Pascal, who like made basically all the green light decisions. And there's this bit in the emails, which I think is so Hollywood because, Gagan and Michael Linton, they were genuinely buddies. Like they would play tennis together on the weekends and like talk about in these emails, like talking about their marriages and things like that. And, the studio was going to hire, Gagan to write, I forget which project, but, some project of theirs. And his quote at the time was, 800,000. Like that's just what he got to write a script. So they're talking about what they're going to offer him. And they're saying like, well, his quote's 800. That's pretty high. And Michael Linton is like, I know that he's broke and he'll do it for 540. So let's offer him that.
Jesus Christ.
Damn, that is rough, dude.
I mean, 540 ain't bad either, but that is very Hollywood.
Evan, if you ever call one of my editors and say, I know he's broke, he'll do it for less than $1 a word, I will come to your house and do the scene in which George Clooney threatens the oil executive to you.
Well, that's actually, I've been meaning, it's good that you mentioned that because that's like, I was wanting to bring up that scene because that feels like a little bit of like Bob Bear projection, like, yeah, I really am that badass. Like I could do that.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't think you're probably gonna take like, because Dean White, no, he's not the oil guy. He's the head of the White Shoe law firm that like has the oil company. Yeah. He's like the name partner of the firm. It's like, I don't think you're probably gonna threaten him with murder. Like,
not just him, but his wife and child.
His wife and daughter.
Right.
It's like, don't get me wrong. I don't know. I to my knowledge, I've never been friends with like a CIA case officer abroad, but I don't know if they are the guys who would be doing that. But no. Maybe.
Well, also all the like, I mean, he's portrayed sort of as an assassin, but he goes in. I did like that. It is a very if we were to take our operator score into this movie or the realism score is extremely high in that there are almost no moments of actual physical violence in this movie. Like Clooney's Bob's sent in to kill multiple people. And in the first one, he kills the drug dealers just by like, he fucks with the battery on the Stinger missile in their trunk or something like that, and it blows up. And like the only time he gets actually physically accosted is just 3 guys that grab him in a hotel room, and he goes like for a little bit, and then which is what happens when 3 guys grab you in a hotel room, and they're taken away. So that, you're right, Evan. That scene was a little bit like, what is he actually going to do? Because he prefaces that where he's like, if anything happens to me, this is what will happen to you. And it's like, does Bob have like hitters?
Does Bob have shooters?
Does Bob have shooters in the DMV? Like, are they
William Hurt?
Are they just out
William
there?
Hurt is Bob's shooter, but I don't think William Hurt would do anything. There's actually, in speaking of Imran, of like good little screenwriting things, when Bob goes to Beirut and like Jack is saying like, we actually don't see they're like, CIA tells Bob, go make sure this guy dies. And then Bob, of course, subcontracts the job to Moussaoui, who's like the real like asshole. Yeah. And in their meeting, there's like this little bit of screenwriting where Bob keeps calling him Jimmy. And he's like, I'm not Jimmy, like I'm Moussaoui. And it's like this little hint that like, Bob should probably be clued into like something has changed with Jimmy, the guy who used to do dirt for Bob is like probably not going to do dirt for Bob anymore, which I liked a lot. I also have to say, I kind of remembered that the scene was coming and I was like preparing myself for it. But that millisecond shot of the nail coming out of Bob's hand is like that fucking has stuck with me for like a decade. Oof. That never happened to me in the Middle East, but I never tried to subcontract a hit.
I love that Mark Strong's character has like even though I don't know if he's explicitly Iranian. I guess Moussaoui it'd be an Iranian name, but the fact that he speaks English with like this very specific kind of like New Jersey accent it's really funny.
I looked up because I was like, is Mark Strong a guy who has a weird number of credits on his resume of like doing
being an Arab or something,
beige face and playing terrorists of indistinct origin, or something? Some of these actors or something, you look them up and it's like, oh, they are actually like a quarter Syrian or something like that on like their mother's side. No. Mark Strong was born Marco Giuseppe Celusolia in Islington, London, the son of an Austrian mother and Italian father. He's an Italian guy.
Jimmy is like a guy. So when I lived in Beirut, I was doing research mostly on Egypt, and I never had to do reporting on like Lebanese stuff, but I had friends who had to interact with Hezbollah sometimes. And the idea of there being a guy named Moussaoui who probably like lives half the time in Lebanon and half the time in New Jersey. And in New Jersey, he's called Jimmy, and in Lebanon, he's called Moussaoui. That seems like a very real thing that like Kagan may have picked up on in his unlimited research budget. There's like details like that, or like the worker housing, the Pakistani worker housing in the Gulf. I mean, that I also happen to live in Qatar, and like that was just so real. There's like a moment where they're all trying to jam onto the bus, and like one of their own overseers is like slapping them around, and like there's a guy who has like a tiny little plastic bag with his lunch in it that he's trying to like get into the bus, and those are just like, you can tell that Kagan and company like
that was the opening shot of the movie, I think.
Yeah,
is the Pakistani workers trying to get on a bus.
Yeah,
it's the first shot. It's like the call to prayer before dawn. They're all trying to get on the bus, and then they get to the oil facility, and the guy tells it like. And I think it's implied, like, because of the Connex Killian merger, like, they're all laid off.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about movies and their opening and closing shots, and when directors and writers are being thoughtful about what they show you first, what they show you last, if what we see first is sort of these guys trying to earn a wage and live a life of like, sort of meager honor in the Gulf. And the last shot, I forget if the last shot, is it the Connex explosion, or is it Matt Damon returning home?
No, it's Jeffrey
Bennett.
Wright.
Oh, it's Bennett. Right. It's Bennett shutting the door, taking his dad inside. If you want to connect those, and also sort of that to moments throughout the film, it's a lot about shit rolling downhill onto people, absent the whole like GWOT context. It's sort of like these are all people who are having to operate with greater power pushing down on them. It's Bennett kind of starts the movie. You assume Bennett has like an impulse at the beginning of the movie to be like an honorable guy. Like he's going to do the best he can to like figure out what the corruption in this deal was. And then without really making it very blatant, I think it's like good screenwriting. Bennett gives in. Bennett, without us really seeing it happen, he decides that he's gonna, like exist in the belly of the beast. And, Clooney, I guess you could say he kind of bucks against it and he gets killed as a result. Nasir bucks against it. He gets killed as a result. Shit's rolling downhill on Matt Damon. And the shit's rolling downhill on the Pakistani workers who also try to take matters into their own hands. And that was, I don't know if it was sort of intended or coming out of Kagan's own subconscious as he wrote, but that felt like a powerful theme throughout the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that idea of people being at the mercy of these institutions and not being able to fight them. I guess the other sort of major work of culture that I think addresses that really well is probably The Wire, which was airing at the same time as Syriana. And I think they have a similarity in that, like, a lot of the characters in The Wire, because you have more time with them, I think they do come out more as people, but there's still an element of it where it's like, it's like this is the the police commissioner, like this is the drug dealer, like these sort of archetypes of a certain type of person in society, because what it's trying to do is not tell a story about individuals, but about like the way that a civilization functions. I think that's something that these things have in common. But yeah, I think that consistent theme of like there is a theme of fathers and sons running through it, and the relationship that Bennett has with his father is interesting, because you sort of initially might think that like he's disgusted with his father because Bennett wants to be this like really successful straight-laced person, and his father is an alcoholic who can't look after himself, and he doesn't want to turn out like him, and he's such a like controlled presence, and clearly somebody who who seems to have a hold of his urges and his emotions. And then his father kind of emerges as almost like a moral conscience, just through the way that he looks at him, like the way that he's sitting on the stoop when Bennett gets out of the limousine, and he's looking at him like, you've just become a part of the system that wants to destroy people like us, right? And Bennett doesn't want to hear that. And I think the way that Bennett's arc is one of becoming a part of the corruption, almost through a kind of like very natural careerism, where it's not like he's sort of choosing the path of least resistance that will allow him to ascend in his career in a way that is like not even unusual for people in that world. I think is like that could easily have been handled in a really like clumsy or hitting you over the head with the themes kind of way, but the way that Jeffrey Wright plays it and the way that it's written is I think pretty great.
Yeah, and the parallel between Wright and Bob's colleague at the CIA, who ends up like authorizing the drone strike that sort of inadvertently kills Bob. Like these are people who are, and you could argue as well, like Emir Mashal, who becomes king. Like these are all people who are taking the path of least resistance. And the ones who take the path of least resistance and the ones who flatter power are the ones who end up alive and successful at the end of the movie.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk about the drone scene too, because I wonder if that's the first depiction in like a Hollywood movie of a killing via an unmanned aerial vehicle. Because I remember when I saw the movie in theaters in 2005, that really stood out to me as like, oh, this is a very like of the moment depiction of the way things work. I don't think we actually see the drone in the movie. The Wikipedia page about the film says it's a Predator drone, but I looked for it when that scene was happening. I don't think we actually like see what the vehicle is. But it's interesting, a movie from 2005, and then in the early Obama years, I think is when like drone strikes kind of entered the public consciousness as something the U.S.
At the time that this movie came out, drone strikes were, I think, I'm just going off the top of my head right here, but I don't think drone strikes were acknowledged by the government. I don't think that they were acknowledged until the later Obama years, maybe, that they like officially admitted that we even did them. So to have something like that happen in this movie at this time is, I think you might be right. It's like the first, it could be the first depiction. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like that in that scene, like the physical joystick that the drone operator is using is like very prominent, and, kind of really, again, without hitting you over the head with it, like conveying this idea of this sort of sanitized video game style of killing, which,
There's a good shot when the car switch happens, when Matt Damon gets out of the prince's vehicle and gets into the follow car, and the prince's family gets into the prince's vehicle. There's a quick shot where the guy with the joystick looks up at the CIA guy, looks up at Bob's boss, and they like look at each other, and Bob's boss just like, I don't know if he shakes his head or what he does, but it's clear that he's just like, this does not change. That's still the target. We're killing him no matter, even though like his 3 children just got in the car with him, and you see the drone pilot just kind of like swallow and like look back at the,
right.
I think that they don't really make anything of that scene, that whether or not the children are in the car is ever discussed, doesn't even happen, is also like a real signifier of this movie's politics. Because Evan and I have watched a lot of other movies that involve drones from later in the GWOT canon that spend a lot of time over the operators agonizing over what they're going to hit. And like, is this collateral damage allowed? Is this not allowed? And the way that Syriana presents it is it's just like, the people actually making those decisions, like by the time that drone is on target, they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Like these things they don't ever actually enter into the equation that the people who are pulling the triggers make.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I also love the physical room that the drone is operated from, because it's, I think the conventional depiction of something like that, especially something that at the time was kind of a futuristic type of warfare, it would be like the cliche sort of, huge room with giant screens and like lots of technology. But instead it's this tiny room with like, sort of consumer looking hardware. And it's like not glamorous. It's just sort of, kind of, a little bit run down almost. I think it was a really, really smart way to show that.
I initially, in watching this movie, I couldn't figure out what era the movie was shot in, because of it wasn't until I saw someone like using like I think it was like a BlackBerry or a similar style sort of proto smartphone that I was like, oh, okay, so this is a movie that is taking place in the contemporary time in which it was shot and like put out. Because like there's no nods to any kind of glamorous or futuristic technology or anything in there. It's all, it's all stuff that is sort of like dusty and old and actually would have been used, down to like the Stinger missiles that he's delivering in the first one.
And then afterwards,
in the first scenes,
afterwards, Bob's CIA colleague like gets the handshake from presumably like the superior officers in the back of the room, and like he's on his way up. And even the drone operator dude like turns to his like partner and is like good job, like we did it. It was like, kind of, presages like the next 20 years of American counterterrorism in that like one shot.
It was also interesting how low resolution the camera was and how that was probably accurate to the era, because now with a Predator drone, they would have known exactly who was in that car and who was getting out of that car. And they would have been like, oh, that's Bob. Like, what's Bob doing there? But I don't know what the technology was like in 2002 to 2005 when this movie generally takes place. But like, I'd assume that that's probably accurate, that they're just looking at outlines of vehicles, and they sort of have intelligence on which vehicle the target is in, and they had that highlighted, but they can't really see a whole lot else than that, and they're just kind of guessing.
Putting Bob into the picture in that moment is maybe the biggest stretch that the movie makes, because it's like this is not a guy who we have been given any indication believes in sort of like any kind of system of moral values when it comes to like the freedom of other people's or what America's like. He's a soldier. He does what he's told, and he's been doing it for a really long time. And he's jaded, but like, would Bob fly to Doha and like drive through the desert? Somehow he knows where the prince's convoy is on the way to do a coup, and like intercepts them. So. But, I'm willing to suspend disbelief, I guess, to get that moment, because it is such a great moment.
Yeah, I have that in my notes as well, which I have as written down just like, how is Bob just like driving around in the desert, like intercepting a convoy off road? Yeah. Like, how did he know the convoy was going to be? Yeah. Anyway, that one, that is definitely a stretch.
There is a funny moment where he gets lost and he stops and he looks around at this this intersection of the highway, and he's like, oh, I guess I'll just go this way.
Yeah.
And see what
it's
happens.
Like, he doesn't have Google Maps either. So how the fuck is he doing this?
Well, he pulls out like a physical map and he's like looking around. It's like,
The only other thing that, I wanted to bring up about this movie is how much it falls into an era, like you were saying, Imran, like The Wire is in its heyday, or maybe starting around this time, I think.
I think it started in 2002, so it would have been
so it's in its
third season.
Yeah, so Wire, everyone's watching The Wire. Traffic has come out 5 years before. I think Magnolia is maybe like 2002, something like that. and it's, to me at least, this is like peak, and it's obviously on the poster of Syriana, but this is peak everything is connected era.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to sort of see, and I'm probably creating a thesis that wouldn't be backed up by the evidence, but like American, sort of like terrorism movies of the 90s are, Clear and Present Danger, Jack Ryan, what's the other Harrison Ford movie involving the IRA?
Patriot Games.
Yeah. And then you have like sort of the end of the Cold War. You have Hunt for Red October. You have Crimson Tide. And it's sort of like this in-between era where, we've still got a little bit of the Russians to deal with. It's the end of the Cold War. But in terms of like the CIA and intelligence, it's maybe like, I don't know. It's like these, you have to think about like the sort of the classic terror groups of the 20th century. And then 9/11 happens, and something about, I don't know, maybe perhaps it's the shift from the Gen X to the millennial era or some other force in society. But I think that you get this sort of interest in, it's like, oh, well, the world is actually way more complicated than we thought it was. Like we're not on top of everything. Things are happening that like we can't really fully understand. It's also the millennia, it's changing. You had Y2K, this sort of uncertainty. And so you get what I kind of feel is like this rush of output to sort of like wow people with the idea that like actually our lives are interconnected, and you don't understand that the flapping of a butterfly's wings in Iran could like lead to a drop in oil prices in California, which causes someone to do X. And then I think we get to the Obama era, and that impulse kind of goes away. And so these movies like Syriana or Traffic, to me at least, they feel very much of their time. And now you have people making movies that are sort of like intensely psychological. They're interested in like a person, or it's like the GWOT stuff that Jack and I have been reviewing, which is much more, I don't know, like, again, it's about it's sort of like about individual people, or it's about the struggle of the brave troops, in the face of sort of a meaningless war or an uncomprehending bureaucracy. It's no longer about this like complex world that we live in.
Mm-hmm. I think this movie is interesting in that context, Evan, in that this is a GWOT movie that shows very much the beginning of the war on terror before the American public really knew that it was going on.
Right.
I think. So what I mean by that is obviously this movie takes place post 9/11, which they only make one reference to. It's completely unclear in this movie, at least from my watching it, whether or not in this universe as it's happening, whether or not Iraq is currently happening, right, whether or not we've invaded Iraq or not. Who knows? The movie doesn't make it clear. But it's like, I feel like a lot of the narratives that you get out of GWOT films that take place kind of after that. Syriana is kind of the last gasp of these movies where the central characters are portrayed as people who are doing things that were sort of opaque to the average American before then. Like there aren't, we need that Matt Damon character for anyone who like, to have the one scene where like the wife's making him eat soy bacon in the kitchen or something like that.
That's such a
like
weird
he's like the one, he's like the one sort of relatable character where everyone else in this movie is kind of like, I would think to sort of is kind of an alien. You know, it's like this is how the GWOT started. It was a lot of people who didn't fully understand what they were doing in mundane, drab little boardrooms in strange places in the greater Washington, D.C. suburbs, making decisions that were kind of fucked up. And I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm articulating that point fully, but it feels like movies that came after that were all like, there's always the point of view of like, we understand what the soldiers are over there doing or they're supposed to do. And movies have different viewpoints on like whether or not that was good. There are some that are very nihilist about it. There are some that are like prematurely woke about how, it is all just like a futile endeavor over there. Why are we in this quagmire? And there's others that lean into the jingoism and heroism of the individual acts or whatever. But like there's reference points there that everyone understands these conflicts and understands that we are there and what we're doing that did not exist in this film, which barely mentions 9/11. It's all just kind of taken for granted that like these alien people are meddling in world affairs largely to the profit of people who have made a religion out of corruption, essentially, like the, Buster Scruggs speech that I love so much.
Right.
Yeah, I think, it feels like as the wars in the Middle East dragged on, the films about them became much more focused on the troops, to the point that just became like the standard type of film about the kind of thing. Like, I don't know if you guys talked about this in your discussion about American Sniper, but Steven Spielberg was attached to direct that movie for a while, and the reason that he walked away from it was that he wanted to put equal emphasis on the American and the, I guess, Iraqi characters, and the studio was like, no, we want this to be focused on the American guy, and it's this weird thing where it's like, as America became more enmeshed in these in these foreign wars, the perspective of the sort of popular art about them kind of became, instead of being more focused on like the people that live in those countries, it became more focused on the Americans who were fighting those wars, and kind of more myopic because it was about like, how much it sucks to be a soldier in Afghanistan instead of like what it's like to be a person in Afghanistan.
Right. That's definitely true.
I think orienting around the troops is a better way to articulate what I was trying to say, which is that in this movie, a lot of times when you get scenes of, the DC shot callers doing things in later GWOT movies, they're contextualized with these people's decisions are going to affect the lives of our brave troops who are on the ground. Mm-hmm. There's no deployment of American forces anywhere. The only American that's ever in any kind of physical risk as on behalf of the government is Bob, who they kind of fuck over. Like there's no troops in this movie. There's no like strategic interests even. That's like that perspective is completely absent, which it kind of never is.
Well, right.
In any film that I've seen so far after this point.
Because in the Syriana world, 2005, obviously we had invaded Iraq, although as you said, Jack, it's not mentioned in the film, but we hadn't even surged. We had invaded Afghanistan. But when you fast forward to, let's say, like 13 Hours, the Benghazi movie that we just did, you've got such a different world than the world of Syriana, because all of a sudden you now have, first of all, not even like troops. You have GRS security contractors securing sort of a diplomatic facility in Benghazi, Libya, where we were not, in the world of Syriana, after like a overthrow of Gaddafi, and you've got like an amorphous, not even Al-Qaeda, not even Islamic State, but like some kind of vaguely Islamist like militia. Who's the enemy? Like, it's not even important who the enemy is. As we said in our review of that film, it's both like I think you said it's like a zombie movie, and I said it's like a Cowboys and Indians movie where the audience takes for granted that we have armed contractors, not even soldiers, stationed in Libya, whose duty is to defend ambassador who's there for some reason that we vaguely understand against people who we also like don't understand. And the thesis of the movie is that the brave warrior contractors were let down by the unfeeling bureaucrats, specifically like CIA, and it goes unsaid, but like Hillary Clinton, and like
specifically, Hillary Clinton.
And it just, it's in a way that Syriana does. Movies of the late GWOT just are not at all interested in interrogating the reasons why any of these things happen. And I hope that we get like a new crop of movies that do, with the passage of time, that are able to kind of go back to the beginning and do, movies about why we're there and kind of like the dirty stuff that Syriana talks about that got us there. But it's so interesting that, the very first movies to come out at this time, I think probably because the liberal atmosphere was so outraged about the fact that we had gone into Iraq, you could get a movie like, Syriana, whereas settle into like 2020 era, post first Trump administration, no one is interested in like telling that story anymore.
Yeah, I think it benefited from Syriana benefited from being made and coming out at a time where there were kind of fewer political lines or like less polarization around like the America's presence in the world. Like I feel like in that era the polarization was really about like supporting the troops or not, and the movie has nothing to say about that because it's like you guys said, like it's not really there's no sense of America being involved in a war somewhere, but I think that the idea of being like critical of American empire in a more general way was not really as politicized as it became, maybe as a result of like the like cultural shifts in the 2010s where we have things like the 1619 Project and things in the culture that are explicitly very critical of American history and like the way that narrative is told. And now a movie like Syriana today would be called very woke for the way that it kind of addresses those subjects, whereas at the time there was no like political valence to saying like like capitalism is part of why we get involved in these foreign wars, and corruption was not depicting this style of corruption in the American government and in American corporations was something that I feel like at that time the right and left could kind of come together on, whereas now it's much more fraught.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To a certain extent. However, I don't know if I've told this story. I feel like I've told this story on the podcast before, but in the summer of 2002, my father did nearly get into a fight in the stands of a Little League baseball game with the man who was rumored to be the local leader of the KKK chapter in our area because he made an offhanded joke while watching me and the KKK guy's son play Little League, that the Iraq war, or that Bush only wanted to go into Iraq to take their oil. And the local Klansmen vociferously disagreed with that point. And there was almost a clash. So, Syriana definitely could not have been made 5 to 10 years after it was made. But even at the time, there were some people who, were not ready for the truth.
No, it was
that it was putting out there.
Yeah, it was kind of. I remember in high school, it was like cringe to be like woke about American intervention abroad.
Yeah.
I think it might be time to say what's on our challenge coins, Jack. What do you think?
Yeah, I was going back and forth on
this. Well,
this
we should explain to Imran that we
right. So Imran, we used to do at the end of each episode, we used to do a rating scale on a couple of different sort of rubrics. One was like the operator score of the movie, which is just how realistic all the sort of like gun manipulation and firefights were. Another one was like a realism score, which is similar to operator, but was kind of tied into just how realistically did the movie portray things. And then the third one was like overall jingoism scores as to how, Star Spangled Awesome everything in the movie was. None of those really apply to Syriana, I think. So Evan and I decided before this that we were going to ditch the like out of 5 rankings. But the other thing that we do is we assign each movie a challenge coin, and we each say, if you had to give out a challenge coin for watching Syriana, challenge coins being the thing that police departments and the DoD do after like a successful mission, they give you like a commemorative coin with an emblem on it of some kind. Like, what would be your challenge coin from Syriana? So I don't know, Evan, do you have yours lined up?
Yeah,
what are you thinking?
I've been thinking about it, and there's a lot of options for Syriana. There's a lot of moments here that would be great for a little challenge coin. I think mine, I'm going to have in my challenge coin etched the sort of shot of Bob, George Clooney, hunched over a meager Mexican meal with a glass of white wine across the table from his son, who wants nothing to do with him and thinks that he's a lame ass bitch who's ruining his life by not allowing him to go do crew at Harvard or whatever. just sort of hunched, with his knife and fork, getting a little bit more of the beans and tortilla with his like midday Chardonnay. I think that poor Bob, poor soldier Bob, who's worked so hard for America for so many years, enjoying his $15 DC Mexican. That's my challenge coin.
I think mine, we'll let Imran go last. I've been going back and forth as well as to whether or not I wanted my challenge coin to have a single broken pool light on it. The other options are maybe a single fingernail as well could work for that. I was considering, I think my challenge coin though does have, it's just a single scrap of soy bacon on it, representing the triumph of American industry. So that, I hope that little boy got real bacon before he got electrocuted to death in the pool, but maybe he didn't. Maybe he died with the taste of soy on his lips. And if that's not a metaphor for, American imperialism, then I don't know.
Well, I was going to say, Matt Damon, now that you bring it up, Matt Damon is kind of soy in this film.
Yeah.
He's a soy boy.
Yeah, he's soy cucked by his lib wife who doesn't want him going to like Lebanon anymore.
That's a good one.
I was thinking about a broken pool light for mine. I was thinking maybe a falcon with like the thing on its head that keeps it from flying away.
Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah.
I just
the
really
hood over its eyes.
Yeah. I just really like that falconry scene because it just makes me, having gone through the process of being involved in the production of a film, and knowing that like just how much effort is involved in like bringing anything in a script to life. The fact that Gagan was like, no, it's really important that this guy's doing falconry in the scene, and like they have to get like ASPCA people involved to monitor things so that they can say that no animals were harmed on set, and hiring a falconry expert to do all this stuff. That I just appreciated that detail as like just a little bit of a window into what Nasir does in his spare time when he's
it's a great, and like the tactile, like the sound and the guy swishing it around. It's a wonderful scene. It's also a great scene because Damon's character is rightly aggrieved by the death of his son, a horrible thing, and he like tries to throw that in Nasir's face, and Nasir actually, which is like a very American, kind of moment where he's like, my suffering takes precedence here. How dare you try to give me $75 million for it? Which is, justifiable from his perspective. His son was killed by the light, but then Nasir throws it back at him and is like, I'm, responsible for a country of like, it's Qatar, so not that many, but like, millions of people. And like, I'm trying to like change the world. That's a very good moment. So I like that on your challenge coin. Imran, great to have you on the pod. I'm sure that, I don't know any movies that came after Syriana. They could have only gotten better from then on, right? Of the GWOT.